You don't have to be a doctor of sociology or anthropology to see that there are major issues that exist between men and women as it regards marriage. Now, you will hear people speak ad nauseum on social media, the internet, about the symptoms of this, but they don't want to deal with what it'll take to correct it. And to correct this, there must be a return to the old guard, a reinstitution of the principles and protocols of the old guard. Now, for this to happen, there must be a renewed sense of honor and respect towards patriarchy. And if you have an eye to see, you can see that virtually every entity, whether it's the vast majority of society or corporations and government, they want nothing to do with patriarchy. And there are many reasons for this, but that is not the topic of this video. I created this video because last week, or maybe even a couple weeks ago, I saw a TikTok video of a preacher giving his distorted version of what a marriage is and what it should be. And I'm going to allow you guys to see that video. I'm sure most of you have. And it's not really any different than most of the disinformation and misinformation that is pervasive on the internet, even regarding this subject matter. So I don't want to give a long monologue about it. I just want to get right into the video and give my assessment of the video. So here goes.
Care enough to marry you, you should care enough to carry her. Because when a woman marries a man, she either been rescued or kidnapped. And see, the thing about a kidnapper, it's all about the kidnapper. It ain't about who he kidnapped. It's all about what he wants. It's all about what he wants to do. But when you rescue somebody, what you need, what can I do for you? How can I make your life better? He got you on a budget. You never give you no money. Now, he buying rims, he buying boats, he buying all that. But then when you want something, we on a budget. I don't have a budget when it come to my wife. Whatever you want, whatever you like, how many you want. If I can't get it right now, just stay with me. I'll get it after a while. A woman's life ought to be better when she marry you.
There you have it. Before I actually touch on the subject matter of that video, I want to broach this. Can someone explain to me the fascination that the so-called black churchgoer has with the Negro pastors' performing arts? Why are they so mesmerized by it? If you watch that video, you'll hear the whole duration. Yes, yes, all right now. But he's not saying anything. There's no wisdom. Is he enchanting you or is he feeding you wisdom? I mean, that question is rhetorical in nature. But just aside from it all, aside from whatever the Negro pastor is talking about, why can't he feed you and teach you? It's my understanding that he can't do it because he's not connected to the set apart spirit. He may have a religious spirit, and that religious spirit just breeds all type of mental confusion and dysfunction. You know, a lot of times I understand that he can't teach you anything because he doesn't know anything. He doesn't understand the scriptures. He prepares his sermon with a heavy dose of pseudo-psychology and performing arts. And that's what he administers to you. But he's not teaching you anything. And the vast majority of churchgoers, whether they're in the so-called black community or any community that practices Christendom or Catholicism, etc., most of those people don't even study the scriptures. They get their dose of the scriptures through the mouths of man on Sunday. And this is something that I could go in on, but that's not the subject of this video. I just had to broach that topic because although spiritually I'm inclined to understand why so-called black people are so mesmerized, but from an intellectual standpoint, from a sense of reason and logic, I could never understand, even as a child, what was so mesmerizing about that. It's so theatrical. And the quote unquote spirit isn't coming over that church. It's just a bunch of adrenaline and group hysteria that could easily be explained away with science. If you hook probes up to the brains of those people, you will see that it's really just a cinematic experience for them. Now, I know y'all don't like me saying that, but it's real talk. It's the absolute truth. But moving along. So, for the sake of journalistic integrity, if you will, I've decided to write down and quote what he said from the video and try to address them point by point. He says, if a woman cares enough to marry you, you should care enough to carry her. And notice how he's using the marry and carry. And if you watch the video, he tries to slide that in, and he does this weird little odd movement. He just reminds me of a Medea character, just a pear-shaped religious preacher version of the Medea character. That's what he reminds me of when I look at him. That alone is enough to distract me if I'm in the congregation. But he does this little weird movement because, again, he's mesmerizing the crowd with his performing arts. And he says this, and he says it as if he's saying something profound. You know, even the simp, even the male understands that implicitly when you marry a woman, because it's encoded in our DNA, when you marry a woman, it's implicit that you have to care for her, provide for her, protect her, etc. We understand that. So, what do you mean? What are you really saying when you say you have to carry her? Now, I understand what he means as I listen to more of his pseudo psychology. And with that said, we'll go along to the next quote. When a woman marries a man, she's either being rescued or kidnapped. The thing about a kidnapper is that it's all about the kidnapper. It's not about who he kidnapped. It's about what he wants. It's all about what he wants to do. And you know, that's the thing that disgusts me about the church system. Here's another illustration of how scriptural application is not being used. There's no scriptural application. That's just Negro preacher pseudo psychology. Because how do you draw the parallel scripturally? Scripturally, even from the culture of scripture. How do you draw that parallel between that and being rescued, let alone being kidnapped? You see, it's these song and dance, it's these misuse and abuse of words while not even feeding you wisdom. That's where the problem comes in at. It's the old bait and switch. Now, we need to deal with what marriage is. And again, you may not believe in the scriptures. The person watching this video, that's your issue. But I'm here to I'm here to help you understand. If you're watching this video and you have marital issues, I'm going to help you gain an understanding as to why. Now, though the scripture would be the premise, it would have been the premise even if this video wasn't about a performing Negro preacher in the pulpit. It still would have been the premise because all things spawn from this. It's just hard for the person who isn't an adherent of the scriptures to understand that. But look, when the Most High created Eve, he brought Eve to Adam. The father brought his daughter to the man, her husband. That was the first wedding ceremony. And that's why it's common practice that during a marriage ceremony, the father walks down the aisle with the daughter. The father, the earthly father, picks up her hand and places it into the hand of the husband. Now, I can get real deep on you on why that really is, not just philosophically, but just spiritually. why that symbolic occurrence happens. But just I'm trying to be concise as possible. The father is handing you over to your husband. That's what's occurring in that moment. So this concept of being rescued, are you rescuing her from her father when you marry her? Are you kidnapping her from her father? These are the things I would like to ask this man. And because I would really love for him to explain why he used that analogy. It's just not apt. It doesn't make any sense. But it sounds good when all you hear, when all your mind is thinking is, yeah, yeah, pastor. And when you have a biased objective to begin with, and mind you now, which I'll touch on this a little bit later, the vast majority of the so-called Negro church is filled with women. So this man has no incentive but to cater to women. He's no fool. Church is big business. He's not a fool. He knows who his audience is. And I'll touch on that later. But in practice, there is no scriptural parallel being drawn between the idea of when a man marries a woman, she's either being rescued or kidnapped. He took no scripture and applied it to that. That is just his symbology on stage. That's it. So again, are you being fed wisdom or are you being fed Negro preacher pseudo philosophy? You have to ask yourself that. We'll pick this up in part 2.